On the bitter evening of March 18, 1314, as the chill winds swept through the narrow streets of medieval Paris and the last glow of the sun surrendered to encroaching darkness, flames rose upon a small island in the Seine, casting trembling reflections onto black water and sending an acrid column of smoke spiraling past the towers of Notre Dame Cathedral as the world watched the brutal execution of a man whose death would become one of history's greatest dark mysteries and fuel centuries of conspiracy theories, secret societies, and whispered tales of curses that toppled kings. His name was Jacques de Molay, the final Grand Master of the Knights Templar, once the most feared and respected military and financial order in Christendom, whose white mantles emblazoned with blood-red crosses had inspired both reverence and terror across the battlefields of the Holy Land and the gilded courts of European monarchs. Yet on that grim night, the mighty Templars were being annihilated in the public eye, not merely destroyed by swords or siege engines, but undone by political intrigue, torture, and a methodical campaign of character assassination orchestrated by one of the most ruthless monarchs of the medieval world, King Philip IV of France, a ruler whose obsession with consolidating royal power and erasing debts would give birth to one of the most sophisticated state-sponsored persecutions ever recorded, a strategy chillingly modern in its use of manufactured evidence, forced confessions, and propaganda. As Jacques de Molay's voice rose above the crackle of the pyre, witnesses would later swear that his final words carried like a prophecy invoking divine judgment upon both Pope Clement V and Philip IV, declaring they would stand before God's tribunal within a year, a curse that many claimed was terrifyingly fulfilled when both men died mysteriously in the months that followed, feeding legends of supernatural retribution and fueling the enduring allure of historical mysteries and dark history secrets that still fascinate modern audiences searching for untold truths buried beneath the facade of official narratives. Tonight we delve into this gripping tale where the Knights Templar, medieval torture, hidden truths, and political conspiracies collide, revealing how power, fear, and the manipulation of faith conspired to silence one man, and how his final fiery stand continues to echo across centuries as a cautionary tale for a world still wrestling with the fragile line between justice and persecution. In the wake of the searing flames that consumed Jacques de Molay's final moments, we must journey backward to understand how a modest band of warrior monks evolved into the most formidable force of medieval Europe. For the true roots of this dark conspiracy lie not merely in a king's greed, but in the staggering power and mystique the Knights Templar came to wield, power that would eventually seal their doom and embed their name into the annals of dark history and medieval conspiracies whispered about even today across countless documentaries, secret society theories, and viral YouTube exposés seeking hidden truths beneath ancient stones and forgotten parchments. It all began in the year 1119, amid the chaos and bloodshed left in the wake of the First Crusade, when 9 French knights, driven by religious zeal and a fierce devotion to protecting Christian pilgrims traveling the treacherous roads to the Holy Land, took sacred vows to defend the faithful from bandits and hostile forces, a humble mission born from faith yet destined to transform the very fabric of medieval power structures. Wearing distinctive white mantles marked by stark red crosses, symbols that became synonymous with both divine purpose and silent menace, the Templars swiftly transcended their initial role as guardians of desert highways, rising through the ranks of Christendom to become bankers, diplomats, and elite warriors, their influence seeping into royal courts and Vatican corridors alike. By the 13th century, these once obscure monks commanded staggering wealth, controlling vast networks of estates, fortresses, and sophisticated financial operations stretching from Jerusalem to Paris, forging what many historians now regard as the medieval world's first multinational corporation, trusted by kings to safeguard fortunes, move armies, and stabilize entire economies through complex systems of medieval banking and letters of credit that allowed merchants, pilgrims, and nobility to transfer massive sums across continents, a feat that sounds astonishingly modern and fuels countless modern conspiracy theories about hidden Templar treasures and secret knowledge lost to time. Their ships dominated Mediterranean trade routes, and entire kingdoms were entangled in debts owed to the order, sowing seeds of envy and fear among rulers who increasingly viewed the Templars as a state within a state, an independent empire cloaked in holy symbols yet standing ominously outside the grasp of any single monarch's authority. It was into this world of pious devotion intertwined with political and financial might that Jacques de Molay was born around 1243 in Burgundy, a man of minor nobility whose ambition and martial prowess propelled him through the ranks of the order, eventually crowning him Grand Master in 1292, a pivotal moment when the very existence of the Templars stood on the precipice of existential crisis. But even as de Molay rose, storm clouds gathered across Europe's fractured political landscape, heralding a brutal reckoning that would transform the Templars from celebrated guardians of Christendom into targets of one of history's most ruthless political takedowns, orchestrated not only for gold but for the erasure of memory itself, a sinister blueprint of institutional destruction whose shadows still loom over how power manipulates narratives and silences threats. And it is in this clash between sacred duty and ruthless ambition that the seeds were sown for the horrors to come, setting the stage for a clash where the stakes would not merely be wealth or territory, but the very soul of medieval Christendom, a story we shall now unfold as we enter the turbulent years following the collapse of the Crusader strongholds, where new enemies emerged not from distant deserts, but from thrones far closer to home. By the close of the 13th century, the gleaming cross of the Knights Templar, once blazing across desert sands and echoing in the war cries of Christian armies, found itself battered beneath a rising tide of disillusionment and geopolitical turmoil that would prove far more dangerous than any Saracen blade. For the fall of Acre in 1291, the last major Crusader bastion in the Holy Land, did not merely signify a battlefield defeat, but marked the unraveling of a purpose that had defined the Templars for nearly 2 centuries, casting their future into perilous uncertainty and setting into motion a dark chain of events that would transform these revered warrior monks into hunted fugitives whose secrets would fuel centuries of hidden history theories and medieval conspiracy legends, now dissected in countless viral documentaries and true crime history channels, vying for millions of views in the digital age. As the walls of Acre crumbled under the relentless assault of Mamluk forces, a tidal wave of panic swept through the Christian world, sending ripples of fear all the way back to the courts of Europe, for without the Holy Land to defend the Templars' very identity as sacred protectors of pilgrims and guardians of Christendom stood on a knife's edge. Their military roles seemingly obsolete, yet their staggering wealth and far-reaching influence remained very much intact. A dangerous paradox in an age when kings were increasingly unwilling to tolerate any power they could neither control nor wholly understand. Jacques de Molay, ascending to Grand Master in 1292, amid this swirling storm, recognized the existential threat facing his order and sought desperately to carve a new mission to justify the Templars' survival, advocating for a fresh crusade to reclaim the lost territories and proposing internal reforms to combat the corruption whispered about in royal courts and tavern corners, alike reforms that might have secured the Templars' future, but instead placed de Molay squarely in the crosshairs of monarchs who saw in the order's vulnerabilities an unprecedented opportunity for political and financial gain. To men like King Philip IV of France, a sovereign of icy intelligence and ruthless ambition, the Templars' wealth was an irresistible lure, a treasure trove that could extinguish royal debts, consolidate authority, and silence rivals, while simultaneously eliminating a powerful institution whose loyalty lay not with any crown, but with the distant Pope in Rome. This shifting political landscape of early 14th century Europe was increasingly defined by emerging notions of centralized royal sovereignty, where no independent military order, no matter how pious or decorated in Crusader glory, could be allowed to exist outside the king's absolute grasp. And so, amid the ruins of Acre and the ashes of lost Crusader kingdoms, the seeds were sown for a calculated annihilation, whose meticulous planning would leave historians and modern conspiracy theorists alike marveling at its audacity, for as Europe's monarchs began to consolidate their realms into the first faint outlines of nation-states, the Templars found themselves stranded between worlds, revered relics of a crusading age slipping rapidly into history, yet too rich and too independent to simply fade away, a perilous combination that would soon invite the full fury of a crown determined to erase them from existence, not only in life but in memory itself. And it is into this gathering darkness that we now turn, where Philip IV's cunning schemes transform from whispered suspicion into an empire-shaking operation designed to obliterate the Templars and seize their legendary secrets in a single decisive stroke. In the shadow-drenched corridors of power in early 14th century France, a singular mind plotted with relentless precision for King Philip IV, known as Philip the Fair, though history remembers him far more for his ruthless cunning than any beauty of countenance surveyed the fractured landscape of medieval Europe, and saw in the crisis of the Knights Templar not merely the demise of a religious order, but the perfect solution to his kingdom's financial desperation and the consolidation of his absolute authority, crafting what modern historians and viral dark history channels alike have come to describe as one of the most devastating medieval conspiracies ever executed under the guise of justice. A grand strategy so chillingly modern in its weaponization of law propaganda and manufactured scandal that echoes of it can still be traced in the political machinations and cover-ups dissected across YouTube's endless streams of hidden history and conspiracy investigations. Philip, whose coffers had been drained by costly wars and the extravagant machinery of royal governance, found himself shackled by debts so enormous that chroniclers estimate he owed the Templars sums equivalent to many millions of dollars in today's currency, a debt not merely inconvenient but politically humiliating for a monarch whose legitimacy depended on projecting unassailable strength and divine favor. Yet beyond gold lay something even more intoxicating to a king determined to sculpt a modern monarchy, the obliteration of an institution whose very independence challenged the rising ideal of centralized royal power. For the Templars were not bound to any throne but answered only to the Pope, their fortress-like temples in Paris and across Europe serving as untouchable sanctuaries of wealth, secrets and influence that Philip could neither command nor fully surveil. And so, guided by shrewd legal advisors adept in the labyrinthine codes of canon law and public perception, Philip devised accusations so sensational, so perfectly engineered to trigger medieval horror and religious hysteria that they left the Templars defenseless before they could utter a single word in protest. The charges struck at the deepest taboos of Christendom, denying Christ spitting upon the cross in blasphemous initiation, rites worshipping a horned idol named Baphomet, whose name still ignites countless searches for Templar secrets and occult mysteries online, and engaging in forbidden sexual acts under the pretext of holy brotherhood, each accusation chosen with surgical precision, designed not only to ensure condemnation, but to make any defense impossible, for who would dare champion men branded as heretics and sodomites in a world where even the whiff of such crimes meant social annihilation and eternal damnation. This was Philip's genius to orchestrate not merely a legal coup, but a psychological war saturating medieval society with scandalous rumors until the Templars were guilty in the eyes of the masses, long before any trial could commence, a technique hauntingly similar to modern character assassination campaigns that spread across social media with viral velocity, fueled by curiosity gaps and dark fascination with hidden truths and forbidden rituals. It was no accident that Philip chose Friday, October 13th, 1307 for his sweeping operation, a date now etched into popular culture as the origin of the infamous superstition surrounding Friday the 13th, executing a synchronized series of arrests across France, seizing Templar knights in their temples estates and banking halls, catching them utterly unprepared as royal agents swept through stone corridors by torchlight, brandishing warrants that turned pious warriors into accused traitors overnight. In that single orchestrated strike, Philip severed the Templars from their networks, confiscated their records, and ensured that no coordinated defense could be mounted, plunging the once mighty order into an abyss of isolation, fear and looming torture whose details remain some of the most harrowing in medieval history, and whose horrors we shall now uncover as we descend into the grim cells where the Templars, including their steadfast Grand Master, Jacques de Molay, would be forced to choose between silence and unspeakable agony. In the silent stone chambers of medieval prisons, where flickering torchlight cast monstrous shadows upon cold dripping walls, the true machinery behind Philip III's masterstroke began its grim work, for it was not swords or armies that would ultimately destroy the Knights Templar, but a systematic program of torture and psychological devastation so ruthless and precise that modern historians and viral YouTube documentaries alike cite it as an early blueprint for the kind of forced confessions and show trials that would scar human history centuries later, echoing through dark history playlists and conspiracy theory channels eager to expose the hidden horrors of the past. Once seized, the Templars' men who had stood unflinching on battlefields, whose oaths and brotherhood had been forged in blood and faith, found themselves chained, starved, and thrust into cells so narrow that many could neither stand upright nor fully recline, their senses battered by darkness, thirst, and the relentless silence of isolation, an environment meticulously designed to erode not merely the flesh but the very certainty of their memories and beliefs. Medieval interrogators, armed with both papal authorization and the cruel ingenuity of the Inquisition, understood that physical agony was only one axis of control. Psychological torture, wielded with quiet menace, often proved far more devastating, for the mind could be bent long before bones broke, and the spectre of eternal damnation hung heavier than any iron manacle. To many modern viewers drawn to the macabre curiosity of medieval torture devices in viral videos and museum exhibitions, the mere sight of the rack, its wooden frame and ratcheting gears promising an agony that stretched body and spirit beyond mortal limits, evokes a visceral chill. But for the Templars, these instruments were no relics of dark history, but a present and immediate reality. Strappado was among the favored torments, whereby prisoners were hoisted by ropes tied behind their backs, then dropped until their shoulders wrenched from their sockets, each jolt hammering home the message that defiance was futile. Water torture, the so-called question of water, forced victims to gulp endless streams of water until their bodies convulsed in the terrifying illusion of drowning, leaving throats shredded and voices silenced for days. Fire itself was reserved for the most stubborn souls, the blistering heat applied to sensitive flesh, often the soles of the feet, leaving wounds that burned for weeks, a perpetual reminder that the reach of royal power extended even into the sanctity of the human body. Yet beyond the instruments, the psychological assault was perhaps the cruelest weapon of all, for interrogators would read the charges aloud in excruciating detail, accusing the Templars of vile blasphemies and perversions so shocking that even the most resolute knights began to question whether their brethren might indeed have committed the unthinkable, a deliberate tactic to fracture unity and seed suspicion within an order that had once stood as a fortress of unbreakable loyalty. Jacques de Molay himself, subjected to weeks of this relentless assault, finally yielded to a confession, a document historians now recognize as the testament of a man broken, for while he admitted to spitting upon the cross and denying Christ, his words were curiously empty of dates, places, or concrete details, revealing a mind battered into submission, yet still clinging, however faintly, to the hope of vindication. This was the tragic brilliance of Philip's plan to force the Templars to become the authors of their own destruction, to make them complicit in the narrative that would erase their legacy from history. But even as the Grand Master's spirit appeared to waver, forces beyond the king's direct grasp were stirring in Avignon, where Pope Clement XV, trapped between his spiritual duty and the suffocating political pressure of Philip's ambitions, prepared to intervene in a drama whose stakes were no longer merely temporal power, but the soul of Christendom itself, and it is into these papal corridors and legal labyrinths that our story now turns, where the fate of the Templars would teeter between salvation and annihilation. Far from the torture chambers and echoing vaults of Parisian prisons, a different kind of battlefield unfolded within the hushed marble corridors of Avignon, where Pope Clement V, supreme shepherd of Christendom, grappled with a dilemma that would test the very limits of papal authority and cast the Vatican itself into the crosshairs of one of medieval Europe's greatest political conspiracies. A saga now dissected across countless viral videos and dark history channels eager to expose the hidden secrets and Vatican intrigues lurking beneath the golden glow of ecclesiastical splendor. For although Clement V wore the triple tiara, his power was shackled by invisible chains forged not of iron but of politics and fear, for he owed his fragile position in no small measure to the calculating will of King Philip IV of France, whose audacious challenge to papal supremacy had already shattered the dignity of the Church. When Philip orchestrated the humiliation and death of Pope Boniface VIII, decades before a grim warning that not even the spiritual leader of Christendom was immune from a monarch's wrath when royal power collided with the sovereignty of the papal throne. As tales of the Templars' confessions dragged from men under agony yet still wielded like Holy Writ reached Avignon, Clement found himself torn between his duty to defend the faith and his own desperate need to avoid provoking Philip IV, who loomed like a dark shadow over the papal court, his spies and emissaries whispering threats in gilded chambers. In an age where medieval power politics blurred the lines between heaven and earth, even the Pope could not simply dismiss charges as grave as heresy and idol worship without risking a perception of complicity, and so under the guise of seeking truth, Clement XII announced his own papal inquiry, summoning Templars to testify directly before church authorities in an attempt to wrest the narrative away from Philip's relentless machine of torture and rumor. Yet, even as some Templars courageously retracted their earlier confessions, declaring them the spawn of pain and terror rather than true guilt, the damage had already been catastrophically done, for the medieval legal system, as cunningly exploited by Philip's advisors, decreed that confessions extracted under torture remained valid unless immediately revoked, a legal trap that snared the Templars in a maze of contradictions and sealed their fate regardless of actual innocence. The papal investigation thus unfolded not as a beacon of salvation, but as a desperate balancing act, a fragile dance between truth and survival, where Clement V sought to preserve a semblance of papal dignity while conceding just enough to Philip's demands to avoid triggering the same brutal fate that had consumed his predecessors. Modern historians and viral documentaries alike highlight this as one of the most tragic ironies in the saga of the Knights Templar, that even the spiritual fortress of Rome proved powerless to protect an order that had once stood as Christendom's shield, leaving Jacques de Molay and his brothers twisting in a net woven from royal ambition, legal manipulation, and ecclesiastical fear. But amid this swirling tempest of politics and theology, a single man refused to let silence become his tombstone. For as the papal inquiry reached its climax, Jacques de Molay, battered yet unbroken in spirit, prepared to step forward with words that would ignite a final explosive confrontation, an act of defiance that would transform his story from that of a crushed prisoner into a legend whispered through centuries. And it is to this climactic moment that we now turn, where the Grand Master would either save his order or seal its doom with the power of a single truth. Amid the echoing hush of the Papal Commission, gathered beneath vaulted ceilings in Avignon, with sunlight pouring through stained glass in fractured rainbows that danced across cold marble floors, Jacques de Molay stepped forward, a man bearing the scars of torture, his shoulders stooped beneath invisible weights of chains, secrecy, and unspeakable pain, yet his eyes blazing with a fierce and desperate clarity that would transform him in that instant from a broken prisoner into an immortal figure of defiance. And it is this moment captured in medieval chronicles and immortalized in countless dark history documentaries and viral YouTube narratives that has cemented de Molay's place as one of history's most compelling martyrs for truth, a symbol invoked wherever power seeks to crush dissent and silence inconvenient truths. Summoned to deliver his final confession before the papal commission, de Molay was expected to bow his head, murmur words of submission, and vanish quietly into the machinery of condemnation. Philip V had so meticulously constructed a closing act in a drama whose outcome seemed as predetermined as the flames already licking the timber of the execution pyres being prepared in Paris. Yet instead, in a voice trembling not from fear but from the strain of months of agony, de Molay spoke words that ripped through the polite pieties of the ecclesiastical courtroom, publicly declaring that the Templars were innocent of all charges, that every confession had been wrenched from him and his brethren under torture, and that the order's honor remained unsullied, his voice swelling as he called upon God to judge between the truth and the lies that had condemned them. Chroniclers describe how even hardened churchmen fell silent at his proclamation, some crossing themselves in fear, for de Molay's words were not merely a legal retraction, but a direct assault on the king's entire narrative, a sudden blinding flare of truth that threatened to expose Philip IV's conspiracy and destabilize the delicate balance between throne and altar. It was a stunning act of courage, the sort of moment that viral true crime and hidden history channels seize upon as the ultimate twist for de Molay, in that defiant speech forced the world to reckon with the terrifying possibility that the entire spectacle had been nothing but a colossal fabrication, a medieval cover-up that destroyed innocent men for political gain. Yet Philip IV, ever the predator lurking behind velvet drapes and golden thrones, had prepared for this very possibility, his legal advisors having already scoured canon law for the loophole that declared any heretic who recanted and then retracted that recantation a relapsed heretic automatically condemned to death without further trial. Within mere hours of de Molay's declaration, royal agents in Paris moved with lethal efficiency, labeling him a relapsed heretic and ordering his execution that very same day, a swiftness of justice so chillingly modern in its orchestration that historians today view it as a prototype of political show trials and state-sanctioned erasures designed to silence inconvenient voices before they could ignite revolution. And so, with his fate sealed, not by the flames of heresy, but by the written laws twisted into weapons, Jacques de Molay was led from the sacred halls of the papal inquiry toward the island in the Seine, where the final chapter of his earthly struggle would unfold, a place where not only flesh would burn, but where words spoken through smoke and agony would echo across centuries. A story we now approach as we stand upon the threshold of one of the most haunting executions in medieval history and the birth of a curse whose power would become the stuff of legends. As dusk bled into night over medieval Paris on March 18, 1314, the flickering orange glow of torches illuminated grim faces lining the riverbanks of the Seine, where crowds pressed shoulder to shoulder upon stone bridges and wooden quays to witness a spectacle that even in an age accustomed to blood and fire would etch itself into the soul of European memory, for upon a small island known as the Île aux Juifs, within sight of the towering spires of Notre Dame Cathedral, whose silhouette loomed like a silent judge, Jacques de Molay, the last Grand Master of the Knights Templar, was bound to a stake. His white mantle stained and torn, his features gaunt from months of brutal imprisonment, yet his eyes still burning with an unbroken flame that no torture could extinguish, a scene that would become one of the most haunting images in dark history, lore and fuel centuries of speculation, conspiracy, and viral curiosity across countless YouTube channels devoted to the secrets of hidden history and medieval mysteries. Royal guards tightened the ropes, faggots piled high around his legs, while priests murmured prayers meant to shepherd a condemned soul toward salvation, though even their words seemed hesitant in the chill wind, swirling with ashes and the acrid scent of pitch. Chroniclers speak of how the crowd fell into a tense silence as flames licked upward, casting de Molay in shifting halos of light, his face eerily serene despite the agony that crept ever closer. And then in a voice carried impossibly far over the water, de Molay cried out, denouncing both Pope Clement V and King Philip V, proclaiming the Templars' innocence and summoning divine judgment upon his persecutors, declaring that before a year passed, they would stand with him before God's throne, a curse whose words would ripple outward like shockwaves through medieval Europe and become one of the most chilling legends in hidden history, seeding viral debates and speculation that endure into the digital age under keywords like Knights Templar, curse, medieval revenge, and dark secrets of the Church. Some chroniclers claimed the very flames seemed to burn with unnatural fervor that night, rising high enough to cast flickering light across the cathedral's ancient stone, while others insisted a hush fell so profound that even the river's currents seemed stilled by the weight of de Molay's final prophecy. Whether born of divine retribution or the relentless randomness of fate, what followed only deepened the legend, for within a single year, Pope Clement V lay dead, his body ravaged by illness that some claimed was punishment from heaven, while Philip IV, the iron-willed monarch who had orchestrated the Templars' downfall, perished in a sudden hunting accident, his skull reportedly shattered upon the forest floor, a double blow so perfectly aligned with de Molay's curse that generations would ponder whether a single man's dying words had indeed summoned the wrath of God, or whether some darker conspiracy reached beyond mortal power. Yet for all the supernatural allure that would cling to de Molay's final stand, historians point to a deeper truth that his execution was not merely the silencing of one man, but the deliberate obliteration of an institution whose wealth, influence, and secrets had become intolerable in a new Europe reshaped by centralized monarchies and ruthless statecraft, a transformation whose consequences would ripple across centuries, a story to which we must now turn as we trace how the flames that consumed Jacques de Molay's body ignited forces that would forever alter the balance of power, finance, and faith in the medieval world and beyond. In the smoldering aftermath of Jacques de Molay's execution, the echoes of crackling flames still seem to linger in the corridors of European power, for the destruction of the Knights Templar unleashed consequences that rippled far beyond the island in the Seine, where one man's voice had cursed both Pope and King, transforming not only medieval politics but reshaping the economic and social landscapes in ways that modern historians and viral dark history channels continue to unravel under search terms like Templar treasure, medieval banking collapse, and hidden history secrets that refuse to stay buried. Philip IV may have silenced the Templars' leadership and seized their visible assets, but in the vacuum left behind, chaos and suspicion festered, while official records claimed the order's wealth was transferred to the Knights Hospitaller, vast sums and legendary treasures simply vanished into the labyrinthine web of medieval commerce, fueling centuries of speculation and spawning endless theories about hidden Templar riches, secret vaults beneath cathedrals, and coded messages waiting to be deciphered, a narrative that persists to this day, captivating audiences hungry for tales of ancient conspiracies and dark secrets. The immediate impact on Europe's economy was both dramatic and devastating, as merchants, pilgrims, and entire kingdoms who had entrusted their fortunes to the Templars' sophisticated financial network suddenly found themselves adrift, bereft of the trusted letters of credit and banking services that had connected the Mediterranean world from London to Jerusalem, an infrastructure whose destruction triggered monetary disruptions echoing through markets and royal treasuries alike, leaving traders bankrupt and royal courts scrambling for new sources of capital, a collapse reminiscent, some historians argue, of modern financial crises, where the fall of a single institution sends shockwaves through entire economies. Militarily, the eradication of the Templars meant that Europe lost an elite corps of experienced warriors whose castles, garrisons, and naval fleets had long served as a bulwark against banditry and external threats, leaving vulnerable borderlands exposed and diminishing the martial knowledge that the Templars had meticulously honed over centuries of Crusader campaigns, knowledge now scattered and partially lost a wound to Christendom's military prowess that would haunt strategic planning in the decades that followed. But perhaps the most insidious legacy of Philip IV's triumph lay in the realm of politics and jurisprudence for the legal instruments he had wielded to obliterate the Templars. Manufactured charges, torture-induced confessions, and tightly choreographed show trials became a sinister precedent for future rulers seeking to eliminate political or religious adversaries, while cloaking tyranny in the guise of legal righteousness, a grim template that would be refined and wielded in witch hunts, inquisitions, and even modern totalitarian purges, a lineage of persecution that historians and viral history content creators alike trace back to the Templar trials as the moment when medieval power first perfected the machinery of institutional annihilation. Yet even amid the ashes of their order, the Templars' story refused to die, for across Europe, whispers persisted that the Knights had spirited away secrets too dangerous for kings and popes to possess, secrets of hidden relics, forbidden knowledge, and mystical rites, a legend that would blossom into powerful symbols during later centuries. And it is to this enduring cultural legacy and the transformation of Jacques de Molay into an icon of resistance against tyranny that our narrative now turns, exploring how the flames of one execution continued to illuminate the darkest corners of European imagination for generations to come. Long after the ashes of Jacques de Molay had cooled upon the windswept island in the Seine, the story of the Knights Templar refused to fade into the silence of forgotten chronicles, instead blazing into a cultural phenomenon that would transcend centuries and continents, transforming these once flesh and blood warrior monks into symbols so potent that their imagery and alleged secrets still echo across documentaries, novels, films, and viral YouTube channels obsessed with uncovering dark history mysteries and hidden truth lurking behind the facades of kings and cathedrals alike. From medieval Europe to the modern digital age, the Templars became a canvas upon which each generation painted its own fears, hopes, and conspiratorial imaginings, with Jacques de Molay elevated from condemned heretic to martyr and prophet invoked wherever individuals dared to challenge tyranny or question the motives of those who wield power behind cloaked councils and marble pillars. In the centuries following his execution, the Grand Master's legendary curse and the notion of a vanished Templar treasure interwove with the birth of secret societies, most notably the Freemasons, whose rituals and symbols many have claimed, sometimes credibly, often fancifully, descend from Templar traditions, a lineage that has become the fertile soil for viral theories and endless speculation under keywords like Freemasons' secrets, Templar conspiracy, and hidden history, revelations fueling millions of clicks and debates across the internet. The French Revolution of 1789 offered perhaps the most dramatic resurrection of the Templar legacy, as revolutionary pamphlets linked Louis Desautin's fate to the crimes of Philip V, portraying the guillotined monarch as the long-awaited divine retribution for the murder of Jacques de Molay, an echo that revealed how deeply the image of the Grand Master's fiery martyrdom had embedded itself into the European subconscious as a symbol of justice deferred yet never denied. Modern historians have pored over ancient records, piecing together a clearer picture of a trial fueled not by genuine religious scandal but by political greed and the machinations of a king desperate for gold and absolute control, a realization that has only intensified the fascination surrounding the Templars as the ultimate victims of a medieval cover-up, a phrase that remains magnetic to audiences seeking stories of institutional betrayal and hidden truths. Yet beyond conspiracy and legend lies a profound symbolic truth that Jacques de Molay's defiance, even in the face of agonizing death, has become a timeless beacon for those who dare to speak truth to power, a reminder that even the mightiest forces of church and state can be shaken by the courage of a single voice unwilling to surrender to falsehood. And so, the flames that once consumed the Grand Master's body have never ceased to burn in human memory, casting flickering light upon the darker corridors of history and inviting each new generation to ask whether we too might one day be forced to choose between silence and truth, a question that resonates as sharply today as it did 7 centuries ago, and one that we shall confront as we bring this saga to its haunting and unforgettable conclusion. And so, as we stand centuries removed from the searing flames that devoured Jacques de Molay on that bitter March evening, the echoes of his voice still ripple across time, not merely as the lament of a dying man, but as a relentless challenge hurled at the foundations of power itself. For the story of the Knights Templar remains astonishingly relevant in a modern world where the machinery of reputation propaganda and institutional destruction operates with a sophistication that would have been chillingly familiar to King Philip IV and his ruthless advisors, a resonance that explains why the saga of the Templars continues to dominate viral history channels, fuel conspiracy documentaries, and spark debates beneath videos bearing titles like Hidden Truths, The Church Didn't Want You to Know, or Medieval Conspiracies That Still Shape Our World. Keywords that today drive millions of views from audiences hungry for dark secrets and forbidden knowledge. Beneath the red crosses of the Templars' mantles, we glimpse a lesson that transcends medieval history. For theirs was not merely the story of an order betrayed, but of how narratives can be weaponized, how entire institutions can be crushed, not only with armies but with rumors, show trials, and the relentless pounding of public opinion. A lesson that has surfaced time and again, whether in the brutal show trials of totalitarian regimes, the whisper campaigns that assassinate reputations in the modern media age, or the digital wildfire of viral misinformation spreading faster than truth can catch. In Jacques de Molay's unwavering gaze, as the flames rose, we see the timeless courage of a man who refused to let false confessions become the final chapter of his life story, a figure whose martyrdom still speaks to anyone who has ever been crushed beneath the weight of a system determined to silence dissent. Modern scholars have exonerated the Templars, revealing through meticulous research that the charges of heresy and blasphemy were almost certainly fabrications born of greed and political calculation, a realization that only magnifies the tragedy, transforming the Grand Master's final moments into a symbol of resistance, a clarion call reminding us that truth, though it may be buried beneath layers of fear and manipulation, can still blaze forth even from the heart of the pyre. Perhaps that is why the Templar legend persists so powerfully in our cultural consciousness, woven into tales of secret societies, buried treasure, and apocalyptic secrets. For in an age when governments and corporations wield unprecedented power over information, the fate of the Templars serves as a stark warning that no institution, no matter how revered or righteous, is safe when narrative control becomes the ultimate weapon. And as we look upon the Seine today, where modern tourists stroll unaware that beneath their feet lies the ground where Jacques de Molay made his stand, we must ask ourselves, in the face of power corruption and the subtle tyranny of manipulated truth, would we too possess the courage to stand in the flames and speak our own final defiant words? A question that not only concludes this saga, but opens the door to the countless other dark histories and hidden truths waiting to be unearthed in the shadows of time. A journey we will continue in our next exploration of the forgotten chapters that shape our world. And so we arrive at the end of this harrowing yet magnetic journey through shadows cast by Flame's royal ambition and the relentless pursuit of truth. For the saga of Jacques de Molay and the Knights Templar stands not merely as a chapter in medieval chronicles, but as a mirror reflecting humanity's eternal struggle against the forces that seek to silence inconvenient truths and reshape history to suit the powerful, a lesson that has found fertile ground in the modern age, where viral history channels, conspiracy documentaries, and millions of viewers continue to be captivated by hidden truths, medieval secrets, and the tantalizing possibility that beneath every official narrative lies a darker, hidden story waiting to be unearthed. The haunting cry of Jacques de Molay, echoing over the Seine on that night in 1314, has become more than a medieval footnote. It is now a clarion call for anyone who has ever suspected that appearances conceal deeper machinations, that institutions we revere may harbor secrets capable of shaking the very foundations of society, a suspicion that fuels endless searches for keywords like dark history, exposed Knights Templar secrets, and hidden conspiracies that changed the world, driving viral content across platforms eager to tap into the human appetite for forbidden knowledge. In the arc of the Templars' rise and catastrophic fall, we see how the machinery of power operates, wielding not just armies and swords, but the even sharper blades of rumor, legal manipulation, and carefully orchestrated public spectacle. A template that has been replicated in countless epics, from the show trials of totalitarian regimes to the modern age of digital smear campaigns and algorithmic information warfare. Yet amid this grim realization, the defiance of Jacques de Molay continues to blaze like a solitary torch, reminding us that even when confronted by overwhelming power and the machinery of institutional destruction, a single voice willing to endure the flames rather than surrender to falsehood can alter the course of history and inspire generations to come. It is this enduring flame that draws us to the Templars' story over 7 centuries later, compelling us to question the official versions of events, to probe the silences between the lines of history books, and to seek the hidden truths lurking beneath stone vaults and ancient parchments, a hunger for knowledge that remains as potent today as in any medieval hall. And so, as we close this chapter on the fall of the Knights Templar, we must ask ourselves whether we possess the same courage to stand firm against the tide of false narratives, whether we too might choose to speak truth even as the fires close in, for history has shown that while power may prevail in the moment, the echo of a single defiant voice can travel across centuries, leaving its mark upon all who dare to listen. Join us as we continue this exploration into the depths of dark history, hidden conspiracies, and the forgotten moments that have shaped our world. For the shadows of the past still conceal countless secrets waiting to emerge into the light, and the next revelation might be closer than you think. As we leave behind the smoldering remnants of Jacques de Molay's pyre and the silent stones of medieval Paris that once bore witness to a spectacle meant to annihilate both body and memory, we stand at the threshold between history and legend, for the story of the Knights Templar and their final Grandmaster transcends mere dates and chronicles to become a timeless reminder of how fragile truth remains when confronted by power determined to silence it, a reality that reverberates as powerfully today in our digital age as it did in the vaulted halls of medieval courts. A reason why so many continue to seek out documentaries, podcasts, and viral YouTube explorations devoted to dark history, hidden truths, and medieval conspiracies that hint at secrets still lurking beneath the surface of official narratives. The fiery martyrdom of de Molay has evolved into far more than the tragic end of a military order. It has become an enduring symbol woven into the fabric of human resistance against tyranny, evoked in times of revolution, whispered among secret societies, and referenced wherever individuals refused to bow to the weight of fabricated accusations and public condemnation orchestrated for political gain, feeding an insatiable curiosity that drives keywords like Knights Templar secrets, Vatican cover-ups, and medieval hidden history to trend across search engines and content platforms alike. But perhaps the most haunting lesson of this saga is that the tools used to destroy the Templars' manufactured evidence, forced confessions, and narrative manipulation remain terrifyingly relevant, appearing anew in modern political purges, viral misinformation campaigns, and the weaponization of digital media, underscoring the truth that the machinery of institutional destruction has simply evolved rather than vanished. In the flames that claimed de Molay's life, we see the stark price of defying systems determined to protect their own survival at any cost, a sacrifice that resonates in every era where brave souls choose to speak rather than submit, a narrative thread that historians and viral content creators alike continue to tug at, seeking to unravel secrets long buried beneath centuries of silence. And so, as we close this chapter in our journey through one of history's most chilling and consequential episodes, we invite you, our viewers, to remain vigilant, curious, and unafraid to question the stories handed down as gospel truth, for in the shadows of history, lie countless mysteries still waiting to be unearthed, secrets that may yet alter how we see the past and ourselves. Join us in our next exploration as we peel back the layers on another dark corner of the medieval world, where hidden truths and forbidden knowledge wait to be revealed. And remember, sometimes the past has not finished speaking, and its echoes carry warnings meant for us all. And so, in the glow of flames that once devoured flesh yet could not consume truth, we find a lesson as urgent now as it was on that cold March night beside the Seine, that even the mightiest institutions, the grandest thrones, and the most sacred altars are vulnerable when they fear a single voice willing to speak the truth. And that silence, no matter how safe it may feel, often becomes the quiet accomplice of injustice. The story of Jacques de Molay and the Knights Templar is not just medieval history. It is a timeless mirror reflecting how power, greed, and fear can conspire to twist reality itself, and it challenges each of us to ask, when faced with lies, will we stand silent or dare to speak even if the world burns around us? Let this be your answer, that the search for hidden truths, for the courage to question, and for the strength to resist false narratives belongs not only to history's martyrs, but to each of us here and now. If this story has ignited something within you, leave us your thoughts below. Share your questions, your theories, your own battles against silence, because every voice matters, and your comment could be the spark that inspires someone else. Don't forget to save this video for future reflection and subscribe to join us as we unearth the next dark corner of hidden history, for there are still secrets waiting to be revealed, and together we will bring them into the light. Let this be our promise that the past will not be forgotten, and that truth once spoken can never be entirely silenced.